Cpac! This is my fourth Cpac Hungary, and you are the best one yet, I can tell you that. Thank you for coming. Now, the subject is serious, but let me start by reminding you of an internet meme that you may have seen. It's about our courageous intelligence officers fighting an endless battle against the insidious spies of the enemy. Now, the joke obviously refers to our language's ability to infuse different emotional meanings to words that essentially mean the same thing. But by the end of this panel, I hope that you will realize that it's not only that. The joke is also funny because it's true. And with that, let us begin. Let's start with a sort of a warm-up question, but an important one. How is classical intelligence work, conservative intelligence work, is different from the 21st century's postmodern version of spying? Chris?
I think a lot of people have the idea that spying traditionally was stealing secrets, and of course that's part of espionage. But a much broader and frankly more important part of intelligence operations are influence operations. Sure, stealing your opponent's secrets, it's a foundation of the business, but influence operations are far more important and far more effective. And in the day now of information operations, and we see those sorts of things going on all the time, particularly even now with Hungary being a target of information operations, that is the great shift. And people are being manipulated and psychologically conditioned and propagandized in ways that they don't even know. They're not even aware it's being done to them. And that in and of itself is an incredibly effective clandestine intelligence operation.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned the fact that there is an ongoing intelligence operation against Hungary. It's no secret that even allies do some spying on each other. It does happen when it's about finding out secrets. But we have seen more and more recently when liberal countries are actually driving offensive intelligence work, PSYOPs, information warfare, against allied but more conservative nations. Right now, Hungary is suffering an information and special operations attack from the side of Ukraine, which is aimed at disrupting the Hungarian public discussion about the Ukraine's fast-tracked admission to the European Union. Should we accept that this is the world we live in, and should we accept some help from our friends and allies when we are suffering such an information attack, Chris?
Well, I think it raises the question of if Hungary is under attack from a foreign power in the form of soft warfare, information operations, isn't there an obligation among NATO allied countries to come to the defense of Hungary? That's a very grave question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so what will be done if Hungary is being subjected to soft warfare in an information operation attack? How will the NATO allies respond under Article 5?
Ariel, Israel has suffered information attacks, especially from liberal Western European countries, but also during the Biden administration from some elements of the American government. How was your response? How did you control and manage the situation?
You know, in Israel, we have NGOs, non-government organizations, while there are basically FGOs, foreign government organizations. They receive millions, hundreds of millions of euros and dollars over the past decade in order to influence the Israeli opinion, to appeal to our Supreme Court, afterwards to prepare a report to the UN, to Hague, to other places, to criminalize Israel, to criminalize our soldiers. We're in a war with the most fanatic and barbarian organization, and we see that this all operation and these all organizations are not authentic organizations from Israel. They present themselves as human rights organizations, while there are political organizations, very controversial organizations. We need to fight against such influence and such abuse of the Israeli democracy. And I proposed, I have a bill, and it's now in legislation process, to, first of all, to tax in 80% foreign government investment into NGOs in Israel. NGOs should not be FGOs, and I also think that the European taxpayers' money can find better goals to invest its money than in controversial organizations in Israel. Secondly, we need to globalize this anti-globalism fight. Basically, they want to homogenize the humanity. And we should protect our sovereignties, our democracies, democracy for the people, by the people, of the people, like Abraham Lincoln defined it. Again, foreign government money should not use justice system. They should not have standing in our Supreme Court. 1,000 appeals over the last 8 years were made by such organizations. Basically, it means every 3 days an appeal to our Supreme Court. It's a bottleneck. It creates bottleneck. Again, we should unite forces all over the world and to protect the sovereignty of each nation, because this is how democracy should work.
Absolutely. Isn't it surprising that even in Israel they don't like it when foreign countries finance influence operations within Israel? Shocking, right? The same thing is going on right now in Hungary. There's a public debate about this. András, you work closely with our American partners trying to uncover one of the most perhaps insidious influence machines in the world. That was the USAID, which was masquerading as an aid organization, when in fact it was a monstrous agency, both in terms of financing, size, and intent. Can you share what you found out working with our American friends?
Thank you. I think what Ariel touched upon is extremely important, because we not only see a change of nature of how foreign influence operations work, we also see that the kind of organizations which do these influence operations also changed. So you asked originally in the question, you know, what is the difference between classical or conservative kind of influence operations and spying? Well, the big difference is that now a lot of it is outsourced to private entities, to entities like Ariel mentioned, like pretending to be civil society organizations or non-governmental organizations, but they're in fact contractors, subcontractors to state agencies or state governments, and there's also private money going into this. And I think compared to the United States and compared to Israel, a special situation for Hungary is, okay, we're also members of the European Union. What about EU money coming the same way into Hungary, into political influence operations into Hungary? And no one is willing to have this debate. If we see the reactions I think in Israel, we see the reactions here in Hungary, and the reaction in Brussels to our draft law on the transparency of public life in Hungary. We see that the left and the liberals and the globalists simply do not want to have this conversation. Why don't they want to have this conversation? Because they are the beneficiaries of these influence operations. So I think we need to look into more and more how internet has made all these kind of political influence operations cheaper and much more wide scale. How the organizations are changing, because what we see also in the USAID scandal, that it's not only foundations, it's not only NGOs, it's also consultancies and other companies. So it's all kinds of entities which are engaged in this kind of activity. And that's why we should share information, we should share experience. And to be honest, I think the Trump administration deserves a big thank you from all conservatives and patriots around the world, because they are now doing a very important job of uncovering this network, of reviewing this system, and saying that we want to have bilateral relations on fair terms, on discussing between governments bilaterally, as it should be in diplomacy, and not through the back door, not through shady networks, not through shady money, but saying that, you know, these are our interests, where can we find common interests? How can we cooperate in the future? And as you said, we need to also exchange some of these experiences, what's going on in one country or the other. And when we have these legislations in place, in effect, then discuss, what are the consequences. We also need to have these debates within our own countries, because they do affect our political debates here at home, and in Israel, and in the US, and in other countries. But we also need to exchange experiences with our counterparts.
Yeah. There's an old American saying that if it's too dirty for the CIA, let USAID handle it. So people in Washington basically knew what USAID was doing. I think we all in this room knew what USAID was doing, but right now at least this is out in the open, and thank you for your fantastic work doing that. And let us thank the Trump administration and Elon Musk for uncovering this, laying this whole thing completely bare for everybody to see. But one of the biggest problems with this, the dirtiest tricks with this, is that these organizations like the USAID or the Brussels organizations, intelligence operations, influence operations, rely on domestic agents of influence. That is very clearly the case in Israel, and it is very clearly the case even in Hungary. What do you think, gentlemen, we can do about that? What does Israel do about that?
So first of all, Albert Einstein used to say that if you give me a problem and 1 hour to solve a problem, I will invest 55 minutes to understand and to define the problem, and the last 5 minutes I will solve it. So first of all, to define the problem is a very, very important thing. A conversation like we have now, and debate like we have in all other countries, and of course what has been done by Trump's administration till now. It's very, very important so people will be aware of the problem. Most of them define themselves as human rights organizations, but basically they are not. What to do? My bill is to tax them 80%. I don't know anyone who will invest even in $1 if you know that 80% of it will go to the state. So first of all, to tax them, to follow the money. This is the challenge, because sometimes this all mixed up, and there's the private money and the government money. But this is the first stage we can do in Israel. And the second thing is most important thing, I think, to work together. As you mentioned, to share information, to copy and paste legislation, to back up each other, because these regimes that invest the money, they don't want to stop it. They want this influence. They want this influence our society, your society. So you need to back up the other when we have these fights.
Okay. As we are drawing to the end of the panel, let's speak a little bit about the future. Do you foresee an eventuality when nations return to a more classical form of intelligence work and stop with the psyops, with the influence of operations? Is that even possible? And if it is, what is it that we should do to achieve that, Chris?
The short answer is no. Not going to happen. Influence operations are really at the bedrock of all that is done in the intelligence world. They'll only become more sophisticated. The real threat, the most insidious threat, is the domestic threat that Ariel mentioned, because it's a false flag hiding in plain sight. So you have this Hungarian group pretending to be Hungarian, and they're not, and that's the real problem.
Anders?
Yeah, I agree with Chris that this is not going away. This is here to stay, and it's going to grow even bigger. That's why, first and foremost, as you said, for identifying the problem, we need to have transparency on what is actually going on in terms of foreign money flows. And I'm not talking about international trade, of course, or anything, but going towards groups which have a big influence on our country's domestic political life and debates. I think that transparency is absolutely necessary, and then we can define the problem to the degree where we can have a discussion afterwards about the seriousness of penalties and consequences on moving forward. Otherwise, we'll just become basically our domestic political life will be reduced to the political discussions the foreign financiers want us to have, instead of discussing the real issues which are important to Hungarians, which are important to Israelis, Americans, or whoever, because we're just going to be having the debates which they want us to have, instead of having the debates we want to have about our own future. So I think that's very important. Another aspect which I see going forward, and which is already kind of the present, is that this has become no longer necessarily a government influence into other countries' government operations. This has become very much a party political divide in this kind of activity, because what we see is that the left has this vast network of massive funding and organizations across the world, and this has become a partisan matter in terms of they no longer represent national interests, they represent ideological and political interests, and we need to root this out from our domestic debates.
And that's
Amen.
why Cpac is here, and that's what we are all fighting for. Thank you, gentlemen, for a fantastic panel.